I didn't grow up making ravioli. I didn't have a grandmother that was Italian. I'm very mixed ethnicity. But I was always envious of people who had roots, and I love old recipes, and I always wished that I had an old family recipe. So it occurred to me that maybe I could look and find one if I dug hard enough. Turns out I didn't have to dig that hard. I remembered that when I grew up, there was a ravioli tool that hung on the wall in the kitchen of my house like a relic in a museum, and no one knew how to use it anymore. I asked my dad about it because it was from his side of the family, and he told me about his grandmother named Adalgisa and his Aunt Tessie, who were amazing ravioli makers. And he had a lot of great memories about it. And because Genoese ravioli is this incredibly important dish, this symbol of celebration and happy times, it's the dish you have at Christmas or someone's birthday, I decided I wanted to learn. So he put me in touch with his cousins. Oops, I need salt. He put me in touch with his cousins. They were in their 80s, and I'm so glad that I did that. One of them has passed on now. But they shared with me a lot of stories about Salvatore Adalgisa, and they sent me her recipe, and they sent me pictures, and they told me stories. And what I thought was the coolest thing was I discovered I have cousins, second and third cousins, all across the country. In Florida, I have to show you. A cousin gave me this ravioli cutter, a rotella, from my great-grandmother Adalgisa. And of course, this was the ravioli press I grew up with. And probably the most exciting one of all is this amazing and astonishing tool that was Adalgisa's rolling pin. I decided I was going to learn how to use this thing. So this recipe that my cousin sent me, it was great, it was fine, it was lovely, but when I looked at the ingredients, I was just a little bit disappointed because I realized that what they gave me had been very Americanized. The ingredients were raw meat, chopped meat, which Italians generally do not do. Frozen spinach, okay, you can understand that. Parmesan cheese, okay. But there was this one ingredient that really confused me. It was cream cheese. Philadelphia cream cheese in silver foil. So I knew that this was not the authentic ravioli, and I decided to travel back in time, and there was really only one thing to do, to go to Italy. Think of giving someone a massage, like you're pushing into their back. And I really like that description, and it worked for me. It is so good, I think. It just feels so nice to do something with your hands. Of course I could have found someone here to teach me ravioli, but I really wanted to go to Genoa and learn from people there. So my first trip, I almost borrowed someone else's mother. A friend of mine told me I could make ravioli with her mother. And I went to the home of Maria Carla in Genoa. She was a very elegant woman in her 60s. And she taught me this one day in August, taught me how to make this beautiful Genoese ravioli with braised meats, pork and veal and beef and porcini mushrooms and pignoli nuts and butter. All these aromatics. It was the most beautiful filling you could ever hope for. And the way she made her dough was on a machine, a pasta machine. Now, there's nothing wrong with pasta machine. It made great ravioli, and I loved learning how to do it this way. But when I came home, where's my flour? Where's my flour? When I came home, I realized that Adalgisa never used a rolling pin, a pasta machine. Adalgisa never used a pasta machine. She used a pin, and I wanted to learn how to use a pin, a rolling pin. So I had to think about this because there's not too many people around anymore, even in Italy, who use rolling pins to make pasta. One day, I got an email out of the blue from a woman who said, "My name is Maria Luisa Schenone, and I know where your family comes from. They come from the Marzo, where all persons are Schenone." Now, that's my last name. and we developed a correspondence, and she said to me, if you come, my 91-year-old mother will show you how to make ravioli. So I said, okay, I'll come. She took me up into the mountains north of Genoa to visit her mother, and when we walked into her mother's house, there was Giuseppina, and she was rolling pasta like this, what you see me doing here. And they said that she was really an expert in her village because her husband had loved ravioli and she made it every Sunday. So here was someone who really knew how to make pasta on a rolling pin. Now, the difference between making pasta on a rolling pin and through a machine is that a machine just compresses the dough. It goes through two rollers and it gets pushed out. But when you make it on a long stick like this, there's a technique of stretching, and it's stretching the pasta that makes it more texturous, and it holds the sauce more and a little more rustic. It's a different kind of thing, and this is the technique that she used, and I later learned that this is exactly how Adalgisa made hers. You can hear this sound. That is the sound of the pasta stretching and slapping the board. So I was very thrilled, and she showed me, and I went home, and I took out my rolling pin, and I tried to do it, and I couldn't remember how. And I was so bummed. So I knew I had to go back. And that was the third trip and the best trip of all. I brought my husband and my kids, and I found this wonderful guy, two brothers actually, Roberto and Sergio Circella at La Brinca restaurant in a little town called Ney, in the mountains. And Roberto let me watch him and videotape him. And I videotaped him on camera. And once I snagged that videotape, I came home and I practiced every day for about a month on Adalgisa's pin, made a mess of the kitchen every day until I finally learned how to roll out pasta very thin like this, very soft, very delicate. It was great. What I'm making here is very simple cheese and spinach ravioli. This is sort of easy, it's not cooked. I can do this pretty quick. But you know, I went back in history and I found that ravioli occurs in Italian cookbooks going back to the 13th century. But I think the idea of stuffing a filling inside of some kind of other thing is very, very old. It seems that ravioli really lasts a long time in families. Italian Americans are still making it. I've talked to many who are still making it like 100 years after immigration, and it means a lot to them. It seems to really be about continuity and carrying forth when other people have passed on, and maybe leaving something for your kids to carry on. So the cool thing about ravioli is once you have these squares made, there's a little mystery about them. When you see them on the plate, you never know what's inside. And I started to think about it like, I don't know, there's a message, like they're an envelope, a little envelope. And I began to wonder if maybe Adalgisa had left some of this behind for those of us who would follow in case we needed it. When you're carrying forth a piece of culture, I don't think you just do it for yourself. You're doing it in memory of those who came before you and those who will follow. Now, since I only just learned this now, I don't know if my sons will carry on and make ravioli, but they sure do love to eat it.